Welcome to Center of Sports. My name's Elliot, and I'm here with.
I'm Gardner.
I'm Jack.
And today's topic is fantasy football and the unreliability of some of the players, such as running backs. We'll start with Jack. Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's been kind of a bad year for running backs because big players such as Derrick Henry haven't performed at all this year, and you see guys, especially like Chubb, another high round pick, got hurt, so he's been out, and it's just been I feel like a real shortage on waivers for running backs. You have Kyron Williams, but he's mostly gone on most leagues.
Another thing is Josh Jacobs. After a very good season last year, he's started off very slow this year in fantasy, putting up around 10 points a game. Not reliable for fantasy managers at all. But Jerome Ford has also taken up a big role since Nick Chubb has gotten injured. He's getting more touches, getting more points, and he's creating more starts for fantasy teams.
I would also say even the ones that we drafted in our later 5th, 6th rounds, such as people like Alexander Madison, are really just inconsistent. With the trading of Dalvin Cook, we thought Alexander Madison was going to be a real workhorse back, but he's honestly really inconsistent. In the past couple of weeks, he hasn't put up more than 20 points. And so as a fantasy manager myself who has Alexander Madison, it's really a big question mark every week on my roster.
Another thing is Cam Akers, since he had such a rough start at L.A., that he got traded to Minnesota, and we're yet to see him perform at all this season. Many fantasy managers are not even starting him in his lineup because he's not been putting up the points that they'd expect him to.
Even when he goes to Minnesota, there's no guarantee of a split backfield either. Madison came out in training camp as the bell cow back, but he's more of a receiving type back. So maybe Cam Akers will have more of a Jerome Bettis goal line type role. But honestly, I can't really see him doing a ton more than he did in LA.
Yeah, had one player who kind of flew under the radar in many drafts, and personally I have him on my team, and I stole him in the later rounds, is Kenneth Walker. He was projected to kind of have that sophomore year slump, but after a slow start with only 10 points in week 1, he's kind of come onto this scene with 18.4 in week 2 and then 30.6 in week 3, and he's been probably the most consistent back in the league besides CMC. He's provided a spark for many teams so far.
Yeah, another big surprise is the Dolphins running backs. Since Jeff Wilson went down on the IR, Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane had to step up as running backs for the team. And after the Miami Dolphins put up 70 on the Denver Broncos, the running backs for the Dolphins went crazy. Raheem Mostert puts up 45, and Achane puts up around 50. So very big performing weeks for Mostert and Achane.
But back when we were talking about inconsistency, there's really no guarantee of a continuation of this. Mostert has been known his whole career for getting slight injuries throughout the year. I mean, he's a 32-year-old running back. He really can't be that 3-down guy. So I think Miami might be moving towards their new rookie running back who has some insane speed, and that might lower Mostert's stock, and it might shoot Achane's stock up, just really depending on how the coaches use him.
The only thing I would like to add is, yes, both running backs played well, but two things. One, they played the Broncos, known for not being the best team, probably the worst team in the NFL right now. And the other thing is Jalen Waddle was out last week, and yes, they did have Tyreek Hill, and he still put up 30 points. But I kind of think that could have contributed to the run-heavy offense with Tua out his second-best receiver in Waddle. So I would say the Dolphins' running backs numbers will probably go down as Waddle comes back. And I kind of mentioned this earlier in my kind of start to the talk, but a couple of running backs have gone down for injury. Dobbins and Chubb both out for the year. But another player drastically affecting fantasy due to his season-ending injuries is Aaron Rodgers. Only went down 4 plays into his year.
Yeah, man, we saw we saw some big upside with Garrett Wilson on that offense. Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard. We all thought, or at least I thought, we were going to have a big year with Aaron Rodgers at the helm of the Jets for fantasy. And him going down, even him himself, I personally thought he was going to do very well. He has a lot of weapons with Breece Hall and other people like that. But he just went down, and I think personally that tanks every player on that Jets offense's fantasy stock. Me personally, I'm staying as far away from Garrett Wilson as I can until they get somebody other than Zach Wilson to throw the rock. Because I just honestly don't see a world where Zach Wilson is the man under center.
Another important aspect is the Jets have let Zach Wilson be their quarterback more times than not, and he has not put in the numbers that they've needed to get the job done. They've had pretty bad seasons as him at quarterback, so it was good for them to find Aaron Rodgers. And then him going down in the first couple of plays was really a season killer for the Jets because they were going to have a way better season than they've had in the past couple of years. That was a really bad spot for the Jets.
Yeah, I'm speaking for someone who drafted Aaron Rodgers for their team. I was really excited about what he could do. And I think, speaking from personal experience, it left many managers in a scramble to find a quarterback. I mean, given that it was week 1, not many good trade options at quarterback aside from, your top 3, Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen. So, I mean, you see many random quarterbacks this year starting. For example, I have Brock Purdy starting on my team. I think it just kind of left a hole for managers to fill.
The emergence with C.J. Stroud, personally, I think has been really amazing. These rookie quarterbacks, or even not just rookies, in sophomore years, junior years, Jordan Love especially. Jordan Love is rocking it in Green Bay. I would honestly take him currently in his state over somebody like Trevor Lawrence in fantasy. He's dropping a consistent 20. In the last game of week 3 that they played, he looked a little bit rocky in the first couple quarters, but man, he stepped it up in the fourth quarter and shows that he can get it done even without his wide receiver 1. So people like that, Jordan Love, Desmond Ridder, not so much, but C.J. Stroud especially, 20 points in back-to-back weeks almost. He's doing really well. So I think these younger quarterbacks are going to be a viable option in fantasy.
Yeah, another quarterback that's gone under the radar kind of is Anthony Richardson. It's his rookie season. He put up 20 against the Jags week 1 and then 17 against Houston week 2, but he suffered an injury, so he couldn't play week 3, but he's hoping to be back for week 4. So he's also been a sleeper quarterback that fantasy managers like to start on their roster as well.
And that 17 points was only in 1 quarter, mind you. He only played 1 quarter before he got a concussion and Gardner Minshew had to come in. So I think Anthony Richardson is going to do what we saw Justin Fields do last year and come in as this dual threat quarterback. But Anthony Richardson is a biological beast. He's huge. He's 6'5". He's a massive quarterback.
The build of a tight end.
He's like Jack said, he looks like a tight end on that football field. And I think he's going to act like Cam Newton. He's going to do a rushing and throwing attack because he can throw the ball, he can run the ball. I mean, I just think he's going to be a great fantasy option, honestly.
One position that has had really solid depth this year in the early start of the season has been the wide receiver position. I mean, you've seen the rise of whether it be rookies or first-year starters taking over for injuries, really step in and take huge roles, wide receiver and flex. I mean, for example, you have Romeo Doubs has had a solid showing. Tutu Atwell has been really solid, put up 17 last week for my team. And I think really you can even see the theme of kind of unknown wide receivers within the Rams running wide receiver room.
Yeah, another big Rams wide receiver is Puka Nacua. I didn't know who he was until he came to the NFL, and he put up like 20 and 30 points first couple of weeks. He's had a really quick start of the season, which is important for the Rams due to Kupp's injury before the season started. So he'll be projected to be back week 5. But Puka Nacua has had a very quick start of the season and has been a very reliable option for fantasy managers that are looking for a wide receiver that can consistently put up 20 a game.
Some other people other than the Rams wide receiving room, that we've really seen kind of break out. Amari Cooper, we knew was going to be pretty decent, but with the going out of Nick Chubb, he's really looked to be a really good, kind of a middle-end wide receiver 2 or a flex option. I think he's going to start doing really well, get more targets from Deshaun Watson as Deshaun Watson gets more into that offense. But also people like Tank Dell, especially. That connection, Tank Dell and Nico Collins, there's the two Texans' new receivers have really kind of culminated with C.J. Stroud. They both get a lot of targets. Tank Dell had almost 25 points last week, and Nico Collins the week before that did really well as well. So I think the theme for this season is really not looking at who was good last year, but looking towards the future. Really, it's a great waiver wire season, I think.
To add on to that, another solid wide receiver for the Panthers is Adam Thielen. After he got traded from the Vikings last year, there was not many high expectations for him because Justin Jefferson took up most of the snaps last year for the Vikings. But after a rough week 1 against Atlanta, he put up 20 week 2 and then 31 against Seattle last week. So a bunch of people have been picking him up off of waivers. He's been a solid waiver claim. And I'm looking for him to keep on putting up big numbers because he might be a starter or flex option for me on my fantasy team.
And I'd say one player that, especially last week with 45 points, that really burst onto the scene was Keenan Allen. I mean, you think he hasn't been as much of a factor in fantasy the last couple of years, but you think back 4 years ago, he was probably one of the most sought-after receivers. I think it's been really cool to see him get back into that Chargers stacked receiver room and get a wide receiver 1 role in the wide receiver room at the Chargers. I mean, they also have other solid options. I mean, Palmer came onto the scene last year, but he's also just a really solid flex option for teams.
Yeah, and going back on the Chargers, with Mike Williams getting injured, he tore his ACL. He's out for the season. So they have really 3 receivers in that Chargers receiving room. So Keenan Allen at age 32, 33, he's aging on. So in real life, he might not be as great, but he's still getting that target share. And one of the Chargers draft picks this year, Quentin Johnston from TCU, he's looking to be used a lot in that offense. He's in training camp. He gets a lot of targets, and he looks really great from what we've heard and seen from coaches on that team. So we'll see how that goes out.
Yeah, I feel like the Chargers are always kind of an under-the-radar team. They always have a stacked offense, and it's just if they can get all the pieces working, I mean, any Chargers player would be a good addition to your starting lineup.
Especially with Austin Eckler out, I would say.
Yeah.
They really use him in the pass a lot. So, and Joshua Kelly, we've seen, has not performed in fantasy. In 2 straight weeks, he's been a bust when we thought he was going to boom. So especially with Austin Eckler out, looking towards these Chargers receivers is going to be. So we've talked about running backs, wide receivers, sleepers, quarterbacks, that kind of thing. But I'll hand it over to Gardner. Gardner, what do you think about tight ends going on?
There's been some surprising performances from some tight ends that we might not have heard of. For example, Sam Laporta for the Detroit Lions. He was a waiver pickup for our league. I didn't know who he was either before the end of the season or the beginning of the season, but he's been pretty consistent lately, and he's been a big part of the Lions' offense because Montgomery, their running back, went down. So they're gonna have someone that needs to step up for Josh Goff or Jared Goff to throw to. Another is Travis Kelce. He's been consistent. We know that he's good, but he's shown that he's not going to have just 1 or 2 good years, that he's a consistent player, and that will be put up consistent numbers for fantasy managers.
Yeah, and I think maybe we'll add on people like Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Kyle Pitts. How do you feel about them being kind of a really not really reliable kind of person?
Yeah, Kyle Pitts, I got him on my fantasy team. I started him, and he's not put up more than 10 points at all. For the past 2 seasons, I've had him on my fantasy team. I've wanted him to do well because I'm a Falcons fan. I want him to be a good tight end, but he has not done what fantasy managers need him to do. Desmond Ridder has not given him the ball, or he's just not been playing well. So it's kind of disappointing for Falcons fans, especially because he was a pretty high draft pick. He had an insane year at Florida, but he's not been able to develop into the NFL and the NFL play style.
And I would just like to add, just to show y'all how inconsistent tight ends are, Hawkinson, who is on my team, is the number 1 tight end right now. And he went 11.5 in week 1, which is not bad, then 25 in week 2, and then back to 13 in week 3. So you just really don't know what you're going to get, even from a high-end tight end.
I think one of the best strategies for somebody who, so we know the 0 RB strategy or the hero RB strategy, and then vice versa for wide receivers. I think something that we often practice with defenses, maybe streaming tight ends off of the waiver wire is going to be something really good that we can do. For example, last year we saw Greg Dulcich for the Denver Broncos burst onto the scene a little bit. He was putting up more consistent numbers week to week than people like Kyle Pitts, as we just said. So maybe looking more at streaming options, except for people like Kelsey and Laporta and Hawkinson. I mean, even though they're inconsistent, it's positional value, honestly.
Yeah, I think this year, especially with the doubt of that flex option, we're going to see a lot of streaming going on in leagues, and that's kind of what I've done first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And another thing to add is, due to the fact that there's not been that many good tight ends, that if you do have a good tight end, that can be very good fantasy points for your team. That could be like the difference between winning and losing. If, for example, like Travis Kelce puts up 25 and George Kittle puts up 2, like that 23 points could be a big difference between winning and losing in fantasy. So I think picking up good tight ends can honestly be a really good strategy for fantasy managers to win games week to week with good tight ends.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the fantasy football segment of Center Sports. Stay tuned for our next episode, which we will be covering the start to the college football season.